Welcome, and here we go again. And today it's time for the fifth or sixth, I don't know what this is actually, edition of the random reviews. So far, I have given my verdicts on episodes like Dark Water, Death in Heaven, and what else did I do? Rose and Revelation of the Daleks, stuff like that. And last time I did the Battle of Ranskoor or Afkolos, which was very challenging. Anyway, at the end of last time's video, I picked out the Earthshock to review, and today I will be showing my verdict on it. So it's a Fifth Doctor adventure, if you didn't know. It's got Peter Davison as the Doctor, and yeah, it's quite a popular one. It's got Tegan, Adric, and Nyssa in it as the companions, and I will be quite spoilery in what I say, so please be careful if you haven't watched it before. Anyway, this episode features the Cybermen, and for viewers in 1982, it was actually a surprise that the Cybermen were appearing. In episode 1, when they popped up in the cliffhanger, nobody knew they were turning up, and it was the first time in 8 years that they appeared in the show. And they had a new design, new voices, new everything, so it must have been quite exciting. It also proved quite shocking in the last part when one of the companions, despite not being the most loved companion, Adric dies saving the day, which was quite the shock as well. And personally, I feel like those two parts are the strongest parts of Earthshock. They're the most memorable parts, and they're the most striking, really, striking, memorable moments. What do I think of Earthshock as a whole, then? I think it's good. I do think it's good. I think it's one of Peter Davison's best stories. I've never been a huge fan of the Peter Davison era. I find it quite mediocre. I find most of it quite dull and forgettable. But there's a handful of stories, kinda Caves of Androzani, Mordrin Undead, stuff like that, which I like. And this fits into that category. And yeah, it's not perfect. I do think it's a tad overrated. I don't think it's quite as good as a lot of people say. It's pretty much a typical Base Under Siege story for the most part, but a good Base Under Siege story. It's an enjoyable one. And yeah, I think my favourite part of the story is part 1, which isn't a Base Under Siege story. It's a crew wandering around a quarry type place, fighting off creatures, and which have been organised by the Cybermen. Little do the Doctor or the audience know. And it's very exciting. It's very, enticing, very engaging. Quite a lot of threat goes on in it, and it's just a pretty cool setting for it. So I really like part 1. Then the story takes a bit of a different direction in part 2. And part 2 and 3, I'm not a great fan of. I like them, but I don't really like them. I think they're very typical Doctor Who, very average, very running around corridors. But there's some cool moments. There's some cool Cyberman stuff. And part 4 is great. It obviously the ending's good, and it's tense throughout, and there's very high stakes going on. And parts 1 and 4 of the story are great, and they're not overrated. I just find the story as a whole isn't as good as some people say it is as a whole. So I like the story. I like it a lot. I especially like the first and final parts, but part 2 and 3 I find a bit more dull. Peter Davison as the Doctor, I can't really remember him much. I haven't rewatched the story recently, so I'm going off memory. But I wouldn't say Peter Davison is great in the story, but because his performance wasn't very memorable. And Peter Davison's not one of my favourite Doctors, I must admit. I find that's not his fault. I find the writing is quite dull, and therefore his Doctor comes off as dull. And there's some moments which he's good, but I wouldn't say there's any moments in this story which he's particularly memorable or great in. The companions, I really don't like them. I rewatched The Visitation the other day, and I'm not a fan of any of these companions. I don't like Nissa that much, but she's the best of these three, I think. I think when she's given time alone with the Doctor, she's good, but not here. I think Tegan's really annoying, and I think Adric in particular is terrible. I was actually quite happy when he died. I was really pleased by that. And he is the only main companion to die in the history of the show, which is quite interesting. The Cybermen, I'm not a great fan of the Cybermen in this one. I mean, they're okay. I mean, the Cybermen themselves, they have some quite threatening moments. I think part 4 is when they're at their best. I just prefer the whole atmosphere of the story rather than the Cybermen themselves. I don't like the 80s Cybermen. I don't like their voices. They're really annoying. They're really American, which I hate. I don't know why they're like that. And I just find they're a bit typical sort of robotic creatures. Whereas in the 60s, you sort of had this sort of menace of humanity within the Cybermen, which I think is lacking here, and I think it was lacking in Revenge of the Cybermen and the other 80s Cyberman stories. And to a matter of fact, most of the stories in New Who, bar Wild Enough in Time and Haunting of Villa Diodati. So the Cybermen have often struggled with that problem, and I don't think this is an exception, but they're alright. I just don't like their voices. I don't like their sort of approach that they took with the Cybermen, but it was nice to see them back. They've still got a strong threat factor. They're good villains. They're good monsters in this one, but they're not particularly good Cybermen for me. The guest cast are all pretty good. Can't remember any of their names of the actors, but they're all quite good, particularly the Captain woman. And yeah, there's some memorable enough performances, and you know, as it's a base and the seed story, there's a lot of death and a lot of destruction, which is cool. So it's pretty exciting. It feels pretty New Who like. It feels like a season finale, even though it's not a series finale in Classic Who. And yeah, it's good. It's a good story. I give it an 8 out of 10, which is quite generous, you may be thinking, but I do like it. I may not have gave off the impression that I do, but I do really like it. And I just don't think it deserves that full 10 out of 10, because I feel there's a few things which I don't gel with in the story. So what do you think of Earthshock? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow I think I'll be back with a look at something. Probably the news. I'll probably be taking a look at what's been going on in the Whoniverse, because there's been a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot I need to run through, like Farewell Sarah Jane, the watch-alongs, you know, people who have passed away, and there's another thing, Big Night In, stuff like that I need to run down through and give my verdicts on. There's a lot of lovely lockdown stuff going on in the Whoniverse at the moment, which is really nice. Anyway, see you all another time. But first, let's decide what's coming up next on the random reviews. So, I've got my box of episodes. I've not got a great deal left, but I'm going to top that up. I've not got every episode ever in there, but I'm going to add every episode eventually. Well, I made the stupid mistake of not counting up which episodes I'd added and which ones I hadn't. So, we have got next The Doctor's Daughter. And I'll be reviewing that next Monday, so tune in there.